Oh man, this thing is giving me such a headache. Oh, I hate when it happens. Hey, what's up guys? Chris Cohen here, as always, and I hope you all are having a great week, which is hopefully going to become even more awesome, because today we're going to take a look at how to create this. Pretty cool, huh? This effect was inspired by an anime called Tokyo Ghoul. A bit of a warning, it's a very gory genre, so not just randomly click it on Netflix. In it though, the supernatural characters have this thing where their eyes become black on the outside, but the iris becomes like vibrant red. And it's a really cool effect, and sometimes it's tricky when you try to adapt animation to live action, but in this case I'm really happy with how the result turned out, so I'm very excited to show you guys how to pull it off. Now before we get started guys, a massive thank you to Skillshare who made this tutorial possible for you guys, and for giving the first 500 of you a free 2 months premium membership. Skillshare is an online creative lesson community guys, where you can go research the topic like filmmaking, photography, editing, and basically get amazing guides, amazing lessons, and get the tips and the tricks that you need to get started with your passion today. Even I, quite recently, was asked to become part of a post-production team where they primarily use DaVinci Resolve as their editor of choice, and while I knew the program, I wasn't as keen with it, if that makes any sense, and I needed a guide to get me up to speed, and Skillshare was the place to be. So very exciting guys, it's free, premium for 2 months, but it's only for the first 500 of you. So make sure to click the link in the description and get started. Unleash that creativity, you know? Anyways, with that said guys, fire up After Effects and let's get started on the Tokyo Ghoul Eye effect. Okay guys, so here we are within After Effects and I have my project ready to go. I have isolated the original. Now in this case it has been pre-color graded using my signature LUTs pack available on the Creatrix store, and that's because I want to save some time during preview so we can do the effect. If I want you to focus a bit to our clip, as you can see if I zoom in here, there is quite a lot of color detail in this eye, but this one is black. The reason why I'm focusing on this is because in order to take your clean plate, your footage basically, and do aggressive color changing, you need to have good exposure and detail. If there's no information, like in this eye, unfortunately you cannot do many of the effects that you've seen throughout my channel. Now sometimes, like in this case, we have good exposure and the eye is visible, but keep that in mind when you shoot your footage, and if you are wondering why it might not work, this is one of the reasons. So now that we have recorded our actor or the talent, we're ready to get started. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is how to track eyes. In this case, I'm actually going to go back at the beginning. Now the cool thing about this is, and keep that in mind as well, is that I never blink in this video, not once, and I did that on purpose. When you blink, you will have to create a new track for every time you blink, because when you blink, the iris is going to get lost and it's not going to be the most accurate. You can technically do it manually when it's missing because you are blinking, but you can also do it with multiple nodes. So I'm going to select my clip, right click and go to track, let's say track, and then track motion, and it's going to pop up right here. And in this section, because we're only tracking the eye, I don't need to change anything. I just care about the position. So I'm gonna go in here, go here, and I'm gonna select the entire iris to track. Then I'm gonna select where After Effects should track and try to find, and then I'm gonna press play. As you can see, After Effects is gonna go through and it's gonna track the eye. After that, when you have all your tracking data, you need to go to Layer, New, Null Object. This is gonna pop up and then you go edit target, you select that null, you press OK, and then apply. Now in our case, because this is a tutorial, I've already have my null, as you guys will see right here. Drag to the eye, and if you press P, it will open the position data, and you can see all of that data. And as you can see, it's doing a pretty good job at sticking to the iris. That is step 1 to doing this effect, guys. Tracking. Once you've done that, now the interesting part comes in. What we need to do is very interesting, because we're gonna need to change the white part of our footage of the eye to black or dark gray, but at the same time keep the information of the iris and change its color. The way you do this, guys, is by duplicating your original clip, and we're only gonna keep the iris data, and then we're gonna apply coloring effects to the white part. But because we're gonna have the original clip above all of the other coloring effects of the eye, but just the iris, that's how we're gonna achieve such an extreme effect. So what I'm gonna do is hit Ctrl D to duplicate your original clip, which is this one right here, and then I'm gonna go to Layer, New, Solid, make it black and press OK. Then turn it off so it's not visible, and then what you do is you zoom in here quite close, and then you select your pen tool. Then you're going to create a mask as perfect as you can actually around the eye. Actually, in this case, I'm going to select my ellipse tool. I'm just going to make a circle, and then I'm going to adjust that circle to match the eye. The reason why we're doing this to a solid layer is because we're going to use that matte, which is basically the black, to tell After Effects to show the footage only where that black portion of the above layer is. So if I turn this off and turn this on, I have my black layer here, and if I press M, it will bring up the mask properties. And what I've done here is, after my mask is complete, I will link it or parent it to the null object, and then that layer is gonna track our iris because it's following the null's data. But we also need to play around with the feathering values. So as you can see here, I have a feather of 15, and if I close this, you can see how nicely it blends in. Also, under mask path, if you guys go here and I open my mask, you can see that I've put a keyframe. That is because no matter if your track is perfect, the eye or whatever it is that you're masking constantly changes. For example, in this case, we cannot see the entire iris, so I will need to mask my mask and basically track the mask path by putting keyframes so I can adjust the shape of that mask throughout the life of the clip. Once I've done that, as you guys can see here, then I'm simply going to select my original clip, which I've duplicated, and I'm going to select Alpha Matte. And what that means when I press Alpha Matte is that it is going to follow the black layer on top. Make sure that the black layer is off because we don't actually want it to be visible. Now, with that selected, I'm gonna show you guys the effects to change the color of the eye. It's a bit complicated, and you do need to play around every time you record something because something will be different, the light, the amount of details that you have, etc. But here's how I usually do it. Let me turn everything off. I go to Effects, Color Correction, and I select Exposure, as you guys can see here. And if I turn this on, you can see I increase the exposure of the eye by 2. Again, this depends, you can copy these values, but I cannot say that they will work for your clip. Now that the exposure is high, I'm going to put an unsharp mask filter, crank the radius all the way to 500, and that is because what that does, even though it's a sharpening filter, it basically keeps the exposure quite nice, but increases the contrast substantially. So now we have a normal contrast again, even though the eye pops quite a bit more. Then I'm gonna go to hue and saturation, and I'm gonna increase the saturation value by 50. Then I'm gonna go to effect, color correction, and select the effect that's called change to color. And here you have two values, from, which is basically you can select the color that you want to change from. In this case, it will be this one. And then you have an option of 2, which is basically what do you want to change that color to. It can be purple. Basically you have the entire RGB spectrum to select from. If I open mine, you can see how well it does. Now the reason why is that you always have to play with the hue value, which in this case I cranked all the way to 100% because I want my entire eye to change. But the trick is softness. If I turn this down to 0, it turns everything to red, even highlights and reflections. But if I turn the softness all the way up to 100, look how soft it does, the effect and the application of it. So that's the trick when it comes to this one. And again, by default, it makes it red, as you guys can see, but you can make it purple, you can make it blue, green, anything that you want, which is really cool. Lastly, I want to change the RGB by playing with the master hue. Basically, if you click this, you can select the color. And while you could do it within this one, it's also easy to do this one, but you can always do it by the default change to color effect. So that is it when it comes to the iris. But we're not done yet, we're actually halfway there. Now we need to figure out how to make the white parts look extremely dark, almost black, but make it look realistic. And here we go to coloring effects. So I have 3 new adjustment layers, and you go to effect, to layer, new, layer, new, adjustment layer. Now, what's cool about this is that you need to always keep in mind how to layer your layers, basically. And in this case, since we created a completely new layer that is just the iris and the new effects, if I turn it off and on you can see, now we need to apply all the new adjustment layers beneath that so that they do not affect our iris. And that's how we cheat when it comes to coloring and making aggressive changes to different parts. Basically we separate the image to multiple images and then we stack them based on what we need to achieve. So I'm gonna go to, let's see, I'm gonna go to the black part. Now this is quite similar to what we tried to do with the original iris effect. So basically I have a new adjustment layer, I link it to the null so it has the tracking data and it follows the eye around, and then if I press M, you can see that I've done the exact same thing. I've basically keyframed the mask path to follow as the eye opens up and it becomes bigger and becomes smaller, etc. That way, when I apply my effect, they make sense because they will blend in very nicely. And again, you can play with the feathering value depending on your clip and how close it is to the camera, etc. to do that. So I'm gonna open this up and you guys can see immediately what's happening. And I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna turn all of my effects off so you guys can have a better clue. So since we need to make the white dark, we need a curves adjustment to play with the brightness of the eye. This is the curve that I came up with. If you ask me why, I'm just going to tell you because that, after a lot of experimentation, this was the curve that works. Once again, it really depends on your clip and what you have to work with. And that is why I want you guys to get from the tutorials is not to just copy paste values, but to understand why this is happening and why certain steps are made. So now that I've changed the exposure of the eye to something extremely dark but still retaining a bit of detail, I can see that I've greatly affected the saturation and some colors because of the change of exposure. So what I have then is I want to effect, color correction and tint, and if I open this up, I put the amount to 75%, and basically it desaturates the whole colors, the entire colors by 75%. Then I created an unsharp mask effect again, just like we saw with the iris, to affect the contrast. Then I have an effect here, which actually, as you guys can see, basically what it does, it kind of sharpens everything, but it also affects like how the highlights and everything interact with each other. Unfortunately, this is a plugin by Red Giant, so since it's a paid, I'm not gonna really focus on it. It's something that you don't really need, but depending on what you do, you might want to apply it or not. So finally, I have another curves adjustment to take things really like off the charts, basically. Like, look how black we're becoming right now. Another tint to kind of make everything a bit red, so the tones match. As you guys can see, we have a lot of skin. The iris is red, so I want to put a bit of more red. And then another tint to bring everything back down again. And that is the basic effect of the white parts. Then I have an overall adjustment layer, again, just to make everything kind of like desaturated and give it a bit more of like a grungy look. And now I want to focus on another kind of like effect that was implemented that may or may not have gone unnoticed. If I open this up, you can see that I've also had an adjustment layer to affect the surroundings of the eye and kind of make it blend in with the skin. If I turn it off, look how the eye kind of stands out too much, to the extent that it's actually distracting because it doesn't really blend in as well, even though we've done a great job when it comes to our masks, etc. That is because the surrounding area, it's too clean, it's too perfect, it's too normal. So what I've done is I created another adjustment layer, once more linked it to my null object, and then I applied a curves adjustment extremely similar to what I did to the white parts, and another tint effect so that the skin does not change color as we saw before when you aggressively change your curves when it comes to your exposure. And then I changed the blending mode to soft light. This is normal, as you guys can see. Control Z, this is soft light. Now, with everything coming together, we have our effect. But here's another cool tip, guys. If I press M, you see I have two masks on this effect. Let me show them. As you can see, this is what the layer is affecting, but there's a second mask here. If I select this, you guys can see that it says subtract. What this means is that this effect will not be shown wherever this mask is. The reason why this is happening is because if I delete this, it actually affects the white parts of the eye, but we do not want to do this because we spend a lot of time dialing in the correct values to make it look realistic. So if I also let this affect it without the mask of subtraction, it's just gonna mess up everything. So as you guys can see, it's all about layering your effects and having the proper line of how each thing is affecting another thing. Because if I do this and I put it on top of everything, then it's gonna affect our iris as well, and it's gonna make it less vibrant. Or if I take my iris effect and put it below all of the adjustment layers, it just crashes everything. So that is it, guys. This is the effect. Let's have a preview. Let's go to like fit the scene. So now, as the final step, now that we have everything, it works really well. It's about blending the effect in, because it doesn't just happen all of a sudden. Eyes are normal and then eyes are Tokyo Ghoul. The way that you do that, I did this in this scenario, it's actually really easy. All I did is I selected my effects, I pressed T to bring up the opacity values, and as you can see, all I did is keyframe the opacity of all those layers. So 100% all the way to 0 when we have the beginning. Okay guys, so that's a wrap. Let me know in the comment section below if you enjoyed the tutorial, if you learned something, if you're gonna apply it, anything basically. I love interacting with you guys and I try to read every comment. Until next time guys, make sure to check out the links in the description for the Creatrix store and Skillshare, and make sure to stay creative. See you next week.